This is the template that we provide. It sounds like this. This template includes the sketching patches as well as the string basics, orchestral enhancers with some percussion. The sketching patches are here and the enhancers, and these are the sounds that we've used for this section. Basic strings down here and the legato section here. Just download, install. The work has been done ahead of time with selecting the instruments, loading the instruments, balancing, and doing everything so it sounds like this out of the box. This template works with any sequencer, right? What does this mean? How is this possible? The reason why this is possible is because this is a front-end based template. It's not a mixer back-end based template, meaning the configuration, the balance, the mix has been done at the patch level, at the instrument level. And the only thing that you need to do is to load those patches into your sequencer, like this. We provide all the files here. They are separated in 3 folders. And again, this works with any sequencer, whether it's FL Studio or Ableton Live, Pro Tools, Digital Performer, Cubase, Logic. I use Cubase in this case, but the process is the same. You just need to, 1, add a new track, add instrument track, load Musio. I'll explain in a second why Musio, why we chose Musio. Load Musio. Click on the folder icon. Load the first instrument, piano in this case, and it will load. And we've got the first instrument, as simple as that. Okay, first instrument. Second, I like to duplicate the track. It's faster for me. But duplicate track, I'm going to open Musio in the second track. Again, folder icon, load second patch. Open, it'll load the patches. This is the orchestra short. It's orchestrated. And it sounds balanced out of the box. Next, orchestral long. So I'm going to duplicate the track again. Going to open Musio, folder icon, orchestra long. Boom, it loads and there you go. And you would keep going, and when everything is loaded, it's basically the same patches that we've got here. See, piano, orchestral short, orc long, choir, choir long, orc perk. It's the same thing that you see here: piano, orc short, orc long, choir, choir long, orc. It's the same thing. Just load track by track and load the patches. That's it. With this, you will have a template that sounds outstanding, realistic orchestral sound. You can go from realistic to cinematic, epic sound with this template. Now, after you've got this, there are 2 levels of improvement. At the basic level, we can create a very simple backend. And then we've got an advanced level where we can take that backend concept farther and improve your sound even farther. We explained this in the course, but that's the second and the third step. For now, you just need to load the patches inside your sequencer of choice, and your music will sound like this. Inside the course, the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to guide you to do exactly what you've seen me do, to set up the front end of the template with the patches that we provide, and this gives you the sound that I just showed you. These first 2 videos will guide you step by step, and then we provide the MIDI files so you can test the template. But then, as we were saying, we have 2 levels of improvement if you want. This is explained here: improving the sound, basic back end, and then improving the sound, advanced back end. Everything explained here. In these first videos, we'll talk about how to set up a basic back end with some basic sends and reverbs. In the advanced back end section, we'll take it 1 step further. We'll discuss some more complex routing and how a more advanced back end can improve your sound a little bit more. This is all taught here in the course, but for now, focus on the most important part, or 80% of your sound, which is going to be these patches: the sound, the balancing, the orchestration, and the way we've configured them for them to sound the way they sound. And this leads me to what I've said at the beginning that I was going to mention. We use Musio for this. Why do we use Musio? It's because, in our opinion, it's the best sounding orchestral instruments at this price. So yes, you will have to download Musio. You can get started for free. You can find the pricing information here. You can get started at a very affordable price. It's going to be all you need. And with our patches, you'll have everything in one place, easy to use, very intuitive, ready to go, plug and play. All right, hopefully this answers the question. How is this possible? This works with any sequencer, any DAW. Also showed a little bit how to load the template, even though there's more information inside the course. Hopefully this also gave you a view or an idea of what comes once you've got the template, which already is going to sound amazing, but what are the next steps if you want to take this even farther? We provide support inside the course. But if you've got any further question, please let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of open the template, explain each one of the tracks, how it's been configured. Musio is actually a compilation of Cine Samples sounds. Some of these libraries used to cost, $300, $400, $800, right? And now they've recompiled them into the Musio engine. In my opinion, there's some minor things that the Kontakt version, the expensive version, has that Musio still doesn't have. But Musio, it's a way more affordable price. It's 10 a month or 100 a year, or you can buy the whole package for 200-300. I forgot. You've got not one, but all the libraries they offer. So I think it's great. I've been using some of these libraries for over a decade. Cinebras was released back in 2010, 11, I believe, maybe 12. And so I've been using them a lot. There are some things that you just stumble upon them and it's like, oh, wow. And so tricks, tips, hacks, so you can get the most out of the sounds. So the goal of this class, take a look at the template, explain how it's built, tricks, tips, hacks from some specific patches that make for you to get the most out of them. Okay, let's get started. I colored them, and there are 3 groups of tracks. The way I've got things organized in my template, it's generally I have this kind of like the minimum template, what I call the sketching patches or fast action patches, and it's this guy here, the yellow ones, and it's exactly what it is. Ensemble type of patches for fast action and fast sound, and sometimes for sketching, sometimes just because, well, I just need the orchestra short and it's right there, ready to go, and I don't have to spend 3 minutes orchestrating this kit. I have it right there, kind of like brass, strings, woods type of sound. So these are the tracks that I include in these sketching patches. Then I usually have a smaller like a group of strings, not the full-blown, every articulation possible strings, but just a group of strings that most of the things that I usually have. Fast access right below the fast action. And then I've got what I call orchestral enhancers, which is basically celesta, arp, some percussion instruments, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I call my minimum template. And it's a very efficient because it's just 41 tracks. It doesn't take a lot of CPU. It doesn't take a lot of RAM. It gives me, obviously, not everything that I need, but sometimes it could be 80% of what I need. And it's a very efficient template when I'm traveling, right, on a laptop composing. A template like this works just fine, and that's it. And it's easy to configure, easy to replicate, and this is what I'm going to be explaining. That's exactly what we've replicated, what we've created with the Musio template. We are working on an expanded version of the Musio template where it would include like the everything else, right? And what's everything else? Well, all the individual instruments. Well, I need the solo legato trumpet and then ensemble legato trumpet, and then there are short notes, solo trumpet, and short notes articulate ensemble trumpet. So all this detail, which sometimes sits in the template, taking a space, and we just use it 2% of the times. But sometimes it's good to have. So we are working on the expanded version as well. But for the small one, what do we have? Let's go one by one. Piano. I like the Cine piano. I think they've got another one, piano in blue. I personally like this one. They have 3 versions or 4 versions of this. They've got the closed, the cinematic, the I like the cinematic patch. So this is the one that's loaded. I like to, here at the instrument, bring the pedal sound down, and that's how we've configured this one. The reverb in this case, and for this class, I have routed each one of the tracks to the corresponding group in my template, in the back end of my template. So for example, violins 1 short articulation would go to the strings short high group that has its own reverb, etc. So in this case, I plugged the Musio template into my backend. In this case, the piano goes to the pianos group, which has the piano reverb. That's like what I recommend. And both inside Momentum and in this small course that we are promoting now, there's a section on how to create that simple backend. And that's what I recommend. The backend meaning basis, reverb, sense, etc. So that's that, piano. Cool. Sometimes I've got my full template here. Sometimes we can compare with the my to-go piano. This is Noir, which is a few $100s. Here's one. It's just different color, so no complaints. A little bit noisier, maybe, but that's also taste. Some people want cleaner samples, some people a little bit of noise and artifacts don't bother them because that's realism. Okay, next, orchestral short. These patches, for some people, Laurel mentioned, it takes a long time to load these instruments. I tested this in different computers. They loaded no problem. The nature of Musio is that the first time, if I were to get rid of this guy and I load this one, boom. If this was the first time that I was loading these patches, it has to download them from the cloud. And these patches, if they are big, if they are like 200, 300 megabytes, well, it has to download, and it's gonna take a little bit depending on your internet speed. The first time, then it loads faster because it's already in your hard drive. When I just loaded these instruments right now, they just went from my hard drive to my RAM because I already downloaded them a while ago. They did not have to go from the cloud to the hard drive first. That's the beauty of Musio. You don't have to download libraries, but the first time that you load a patch, if it's not downloaded, it'll have to download from the cloud again. But anyway, cool. So there you go. In my opinion, brass in Cinesamples. If I have to give you kind of like what's my opinion on Cinesamples in general, I think it sounds outstanding. You get this cinematic sound like out of the box, not much to do because most of the orchestral sounds, like the strings, brass, and percussion, like those big libraries were recorded by Dennis Sands in the Sony scoring stage with vintage M50 Neumann mics on the Deca-Tree and outriggers, all the vintage ribbon mics on the brass on that room. And so with those vintage capsules on the M50s, and it just that creates that kind of like Hollywood sound, which is so expensive because those union musicians, so that's expensive. That's really expensive. Plus, it's not doable because there are no union rules to record. They had to do a very specific. This is a long story, but they did have like the union orchestra in that room, which is one of the biggest scoring stages in town, which is where E.T. and all these well-known movies got recorded. So it's that sound. It's there. The musicians were there, the mics, everything, and the mixing engineer that has one unique signature sound. If you like the Avengers and kind of like the Alan Silvestri sound or Danny Elfman. Most of these movies have been recorded and mixed by Danny Sands. And so if you like that sound, this is built in the samples. And that is why they are a little bit harsher and brighter in color, because of those vintage capsules and those vintage M50s in the Decatrain Outringers that kind of like brighten the sound a little bit, which many times with other libraries you have to brighten them later on with some tube saturation and things like this to bring up that more cinematic sound. Sometimes I'm not talking about trailer sound, it's more like cinematic soundtrack type of sound, and it's built on those samples. If you like that sound, it's there. So I like that very much. If you compare trumpets, so this is how a trumpet sounds, right? Low register, darker. Beautiful. So this is Cinematic Studio brass. Sounds beautiful, sounds natural, sounds realistic. Obviously the legato is just wonderful. But if you want a brighter sound, then what I just showed you has that brightness. You may like it or not, it's just there, okay? So these samples have this a little bit of this more cinematic color. That's okay. And so that's what I like about these sounds. With cine samples in general, so pros, cons. Generally, the sample is not as clean. The consistency of other libraries, like to me, the most consistent libraries in general, what I've seen is Cinematic Studio Series or Casual Tools is pretty consistent, as well as Spitfire. And Cinesample sounds beautiful, but sometimes the consistency is not there. Sometimes, like for example, staccato notes, not all of them will have the same time till sample peak, right? But when they are cleaning up the samples and cutting the samples, all that consistency of measuring, from the beginning of the sample till sample peak. So when we quantize, it sounds, aligned or more robotic. So again, they're not as clean, which helps with realism. But sometimes I'm like, let me do the realism by dequantizing it if I want to, right? Give me the precision. So that's it. But I continue to use them. It's one of my main libraries. For brass, I use strings as well. I love percussion, and I use them in combination with other libraries. I like other libraries for some specific things, like the legatos from the Cinematic Studio series, but there's plenty of these in my main template. Okay, so orchestral short. I was saying this because there are certain things that Cinesamples or Musio in this case does very, very well. And one of these libraries that is just so good. Strings are great and percussion is fantastic. Brass in particular, to me, it's just the sound outstanding, specifically the short notes. So when creating this template, I've put emphasis on number one, and most importantly, maintaining a realistic balance. So this is very simple. We've got the strings, brass, woods, right here. So gotta maintain balance. But if there are inconsistencies or problems, or on the other side, there's something that's really good about that patch, I'll generally feature it. So it's not the way that you build a template, or the way that you do MIDI mockups. When you orchestrate for an orchestra, like for a real orchestra, you orchestrate in a way that makes the orchestra sound good. But with samples, we've got limitations. There are not limitations. It's in comparison with the orchestra, they behave differently. So those limitations we try to hide. So for example, if the strings legato is not really good, then we'll cover it with an ARP note on top to kind of like hide that non-realistic, artificial sounding legato. Things like this, right? So the same concept applies when I've built these patches. I've featured the things that sound good, and I've hidden or I've applied some sort of hack to hide the things that are not as good. For example, because of consistency, right? Maybe when stacking something like this, the woodwind's attack is faster than the brass. Well, it makes sense. Generally, a bassoon has a faster attack time than a bass trombone or a tenor trombone in the low register. It just takes more time for the trombone to hit sample peak. Makes sense. But if I'm stacking them at the same time like here, then the bassoons are going to sound always early. And that's a problem in a stacked patch like this. So I played around with balance so it's not as obvious. So anyway, It will sound great, it will sound natural, but these are the things that I have done to feature the goods and to hide the bads. Cool, awesome. And that's where we've spent time. Let's just move on to the next one. This one is for orchestral long notes. Okay. Cool. So that's that. It's good range in the dynamic range. Love it. Cool. Clusters. And maybe so there you go. That's how it sounds. Choir, short notes. We've got limitation. We don't have short for men, so I would add more reverb to this one. Alright, there you go. Choir long notes. And then we go orchestral percussion. Simple patch, looks like this, and it's just basically the tubular bell. And up here we've got it's not my favorite patch, but down here the tubular bell, up here the celesta. We've got another sound for the celesta later on, and then in here in between we've got the gran casa here, and then we've got snares and toms and things like this. To do some tablas. What else we've got? We've got shakers and stuff like this. And I guess we'll have, yeah. So, yeah, tubular bells, celesta. Then we've got all the gran casa snares and tablas and toms. And then we have all the shakers here. And then all the metals here. Ooh. And I like to have one of these in my sketching patches for fast action. Same thing with epic percussion. The way this has been built, I like this patch so much. Basically, it's epic percussion from all the lower stuff to more high pitch and metals. And also, there are ensemble configurations in this patch. So pre-orchestrated, that's good. Also, there is performance patches, meaning, rolls and things like this. So, see? This one you can control here. It's great. These sound fantastic. The only problem with this is that at this point, when you've got one of these, but that's the limitation with ensemble type of sounds and sketching patches. This is for speed. Now for mixing, the limitation that you're gonna face is flexibility. That's why we've got more separation down below. But at this, like having a low hit and the metal hit, high-pitched percussion, does not allow you to then separate these two hits into different type of reverbs or compression or whatever you need to do to treat. But that's okay, because what you are after here is that fast result, pre-orchestrated type of sound. These are great. And yes, great. So anyway, pre-orchestrated, and you got lots here. Big wet drums. I love this one in particular, so I loaded. This is from Drums of War 3. I just wanted to keep it. So we've got all these guys till here, and then we're going to have the strings, brass, woods, and then we're going to have the epic horns, epic trumpets, and that, if you had a very small computer that cannot handle more and you wanted just a small little sketching template, then that's what I would recommend. But for the strings, what we have is just the Spiccato patch. String short, string long, so this is the sustain. There you go. So non-vibrato, you can also do vibrato. Brass short, these guys. There you go. So one thing gotta pay attention to when you start the stacking is this number up here, number of samples. When this hits 1,000, so when clustering things like this, it will happen sometimes. Brass long, same thing. Since I plugged this into my template, some of the tape saturation is saturating a little bit too much. Okay, woods ensemble. Needs more reverb. So with Cinebrass, it's more double reed-y generally. The type of woodwind ensemble, the way they recorded it, is just more, you hear more of the double reed. In comparison, for example, if we go, let's see if I can find, this is more Albion type of sound. This is more flutes, right? And you may like this, and this does not sound as pleasant, needs a little bit more of reverb, by the way, so something that I would have to work on, but in the back end of my template. The one thing that I can guarantee you is that it blends so well, so well. It colors the orchestra the right way, in my opinion. The other one that I showed you sounds more beautiful. It's just, for some people, you may think more flutes and clarinets there, and it has a pleasant sound. And it works great with the orchestra, but when I blend that other one, the Albion one, with a kind of like an ensemble orchestral sound or strings, they don't do that better of a job at coloring it the right way. It kind of like adds... not weight, it kind of like thickens the sound, it makes it sound a little bit fatter, not necessarily in a good way. It adds the flutes on top. This one, in my opinion, colors it in a more realistic woodwinds flavor because it has the right amount of rich color into it, which you may like or not. I just like having both options, and I see there's the difference. Long notes. So those are ensemble patches, no legatos. So just do this and color it with a legato flute on top to kind of like fake that legato of the entire woodwind section, but you're actually just layering one legato solo instrument on top, and sounds beautiful. If on top of that you've got some motor going or some ostinato or some strings on top, you don't need more. Awesome. Closing some of this and going to epic horns. I couldn't do this without some epic horns. explain this patch in a second. Okay, so this patch offers some possibilities and limitations. I like polylegatos. So it's a patch that can do legatos, but if you do more than one note at the same time, you can do polylegatos. You can do internal legatos. This is not possible with Museo. But in a patch like this, inside the sketching patches section, I would have to have as much flexibility, as much output as possible from whatever I've got loaded here. It's not available, so it's a little bit of a hack. So first we've got the majority of the sound is the 12 horns ensemble sound. The legatos for those pedal notes down below. Well, this is not realistic. That's not the way a real instrument would perform those notes, but we can do this with samples, but obviously the legato is going to be a little bit slower here. Okay, cool, awesome. Then the kind of like the Hollywood, not the standard, but the typical trick of having the trombones on the other side, adding that harshness. So without trombones, with. Okay, so it adds aggression, create a little bit of oomph at the beginning of each note, and just also opens the sound a little bit and makes it a little bit wider. So having the typical, epic 12 horns or 6 horns or whatever, 8 horns, plus one solo trombone is something that's typical, almost cliche sometimes, but it's built in here. A solo horn just to add a little bit of extra definition, because as you can see, those legatos sometimes are a little bit and so that solo horn adds a little bit to the whole thing. And then finally we've got this guy, the 6 horn, and this is what fakes the polylegato. This does two things. First, it adds a little bit of oomph to each note, which is great because it hides that legato. And second, it adds a little bit of that envelope that we want at the beginning of each note. Depending on how hard we hit the note, it will not affect the loudness of the legato because we control with modulation, but it will control the volume and the dynamic of this shorter sforzato or tenuto note. Right? This will sit on top and at the beginning of each note, giving it a little bit of oomph, that envelope that we want, helping the transition between notes, and also it allows us to play relatively short chords, right? The only problem and or limitation is that the length is fixed. You cannot control the length of this note by cutting the note short when you release. So you just have to wait. And you can play with this, and you can modify this obviously, and you, instead of having a tenuto note, you could have an staccato note, not an spiccato because it's going to be too short, or staccatissimo as they call them for the brass, but maybe a staccato works better for you. I settled with the tenuto note. I know how this patch behaves, and I know how I have to play or perform this patch to get what I want out of it. So that's that. There you go. When you put it all together, you can play legatos. And you can also play, you can also perform kind of like massive low chords. In that case, what I like is to roll the notes a little bit, because remember when we do this, what we're hearing is that the chord is because of this tenuto note. The legato will not play the chord, and so you don't want for the legato to reinforce, let's say, the middle note. So I like to roll the notes a little bit from, top to bottom for the legato to reinforce the lower note. So it will be something like this, right? But fast. There are short chords, but if one is stayed, it would be the low note, right? There you go. So these pads, for example, let me see if this is, hopefully this is not too loud. Cool. This is where's the patch? Here. It's doing the low notes. And at the end of this cue, you hear them. Those are those horns. These guys here. I like at the end of an epic cue like this to let the brass resonate a little bit more. So sometimes I'll have those low brass horns. That low big brass, generally not as much trombones as kind of like massive epic, non-realistic horns sound like this. And so I let them ring a little bit more, make them a little bit longer for kind of like the end of the orchestral section, big staccato last note, but the low brass or the low horns, I make them a little bit longer to kind of like colorate that tail. If that makes sense. Moving on, trumpets here, it's just the ensemble trumpet plus a little bit of solo. Solo, very subtle, because if we bring it up too much, then it just makes the ensemble sound smaller. But yeah. All right, moving on. So celesta. For celesta, they've got 3 celestas. The one that we've selected is this one. It's a little bit drier. They've got the orchestra celesta, comes with lots more reverb. So this is the one that has the most delicate sound to me, the celesta. If I want something a little bit less delicate, I'll have the glockenspiel. And I like for celesta to be delicate, so that's out of the 3 that they've got, this is the one that I like the most. Arp, they've got different versions. I like 2 arps, generally, sitting in each side of the room for that stereo arp sound. That works great for solo notes, but also for glissando especially. That kind of stereo arp glissando. I like that very, very much. And they've got a kind of like a wide arp that they sampled it this way. For the ARP, I really like Cinesamples ARP. It's super easy to play. The Spitfire has a little bit more of character, especially in the low note. Maybe we could compare it. It is here. This is Spitfire. Okay, I brought it up in volume, so it's an unfair comparison. But it has a little bit more of character. The problem that I've got with this library, Spitfire, this guy here, is that it is hard. You hit soft and super soft. You hit a little bit louder, a little louder, super loud. So it's hard. With this one, the Cine, which is here, has a little bit less character, especially in the low notes. Which, if you want that Michael Giacchino kind of like low arp pulsing, like slow pulsing note, I like the other one better. But this one is so easy to play. That's it. And then for glissandos, you've got major, minor, all. And then you've got all the switches here, right? So we've got things like etc. You've got more swells, you've got regular glissandos, swells, you've got reaps and things like this. Useful to have. And then piattis. So generally they've got 3 piattis. So they've got this one, and this one. So kind of like small, medium, large. And then they've got the open one, right, facing the audience. They've got the chalked, and then a shorter one, which is great to have. Sometimes you're gonna do like kind of thing, whatever. Cool. Shakers, got a plethora of shakers. That's great. This is set up at -190, as you can see here. I'm going to include all the milliseconds in the naming so you can also. But this is because they've got this one, which is, fast attack. But then they've got this one, which is great. But then if you quantize, either you move them ahead of time by ear, or you just quantize it to the crit, and then with a -190, it's going to work. So they've got rolls as always, and then so shakers, good to have here for the kind of like top of the mix. Percussion, got the tam tam, and then got this different sizes, and then they've got bigger than this in the Epic. So it's not here in the template, but in the Epic percussion library, they've got more. The snares, same thing. So without the different types of snares and different sounds. Timpani, they've put it this way, right? They've got right hand, left hand. So this note and this note is the same, but you can do dugadum. Okay, it's convenient. Cool. We've got soft, medium, and hard mallet. For hits, I like the hard mallet, more definition. For rolls, I like the medium mallet or the soft mallet. We chose the medium mallet. And soft sounds beautiful, it's just less definition. Hard is too harsh for a roll, but sometimes can be used as an effect. You can load it down below if you want. Gran Casa. So we've got different sizes and mallets. So it would appear this is a soft mallet, medium, and hard mallet. Then we've got a sub bomb. This is a must-have in my template. It's from the Drums of War 1. Sub bomb, gotta have it. And it's just, I especially like this E note. So it's basically low. This is a sound for just as, that one downbeat every 4 bars kind of thing, right? Or every bar, or whatever. And so it's just this one hit. And I like this one in particular, using it for years. That is laid down like this, softer hits here, and then, harder hits the higher you go in register. But the E in particular, it's the one that to me sounds the softest and has the more body. And that's it. That's the one that I use most of the time. You could filter this one and get with some of the top end if you want for a deeper sound. Drum set, gotta have a drum set loaded. They've got the blue drum kit. I like this one better, right? Sometimes, and an electric bass. And for example, here in this cue, we've got the bass here with the piano. In fact, this cue started like this. I was like, I'm gonna start like this, let's see. But, and then I added the piano. And then the low strings came in. And then orc long. And then I added shorter strings in choir. And then I added percussion to enhance. It's taka taka ta. It goes with the strings. And then I added the rest. But basically, which is the rest of the percussion that adds that. Since I routed things to my groups, there are some things that are a little bit out of control, saturating a little bit. But anyway, cool. So we got through sketching patches and then the enhancers, the choices that we made here. And then for the strings, very simple. We wanted to have strings under 10 tracks or something like this, maybe 12, and have everything that we need for the strings. So the way they are set up is like we've got the ensemble strings for the short staccato and low staccato. Because sometimes we want, strings that just sound big. Which is a non-realistic sound. This would be a more realistic sound. But sometimes we want a little bit more cinematic. Which I'll open in a second. And the same thing with the high strings. The realistic thing would be, these are violins. Smaller, more realistic sound, but sometimes we just want the big staccato sound. So we orchestrated it inside here, like this. And it's just basically everyone there. And for the big ones, the slow ones, a little bit more of work here. We wanted size, aggression, and bite. We've got specific patches that we've selected here for aggression and definition and the low register. We don't want it to be too big and get muddy. Then we wanted a little bit of, aggression here. And then the bite, I'm gonna get rid of this guy. So aggression, the bite comes here. Right? And you can play with this if you want a little bit more of that aggression. Try it. Without. I brought it up too much, just so you see the difference. But you can play with this. Cool. So I think this sound comes in handy sometimes when you want this. Transformers and beyond. All right. And then this is no secret, so we can move relatively fast. So violins 1, 2, viola, violoncellos, and double basses, separated by short articulations and low articulations. Here are the short articulations. This is the way I've used them for the longest time. So we've got 3 staccatos, right? We've got spiccato, staccato, marcato. So short, less short, and then, right? So generally I'll be here. If I want to do this. And then I've got this forchato. You can do things like this. And then we've got the pizzicato. And then con legno se Bartok pizzicato con legno. And Bartok. I particularly love the violins 1 and also 2, but specifically the 1 spiccato sound out of this library. It just, especially the kind of like the first couple of strings, the G string and the D string, it just has a bite that, hey, you know, there are other libraries that sound beautiful as well. If I go here to my short violins 1, so there you go. There's a lot of treatment on this one. This is a Cinematic Studio strings, and there's a ton of treatment. Let me just show. See, there's a little bit of this guy, a little bit of this guy that I'm going to deactivate to just to do a fair comparison. This is again deactivating this and deactivating this on the Cinematic Studio strings. So the Cinematic Studio strings, the shortest articulation, spiccato. And then if we go to, we're here. It's just different, but I like it very much. It just has a quality that I don't see in other libraries, which is not better or worse, but I like it very much for accenting, for that bite. Sometimes I'll mix different libraries. I'll have the more staccato in whatever, Spitfire or Cinematic Studio strings or whatever, and then I'll have the accents, right? I'll add Cine strings or Musio for these. That has that. So that's the only thing that I wanted to mention. This is how we've got the shorts organized. And then we've got the long notes. The first three are going to be three different types of legatos. So before we go there, let's see how I built this section here, because it's just all staccatos. So let's see what we've got. Violin short. Okay, cool. It's this kind of more, realistic first section. Now, take a listen to this. See what just happened there? It seems like there's a little bit of swing, and this happens with violins too. A little bit more than with violins 1. Remember the consistency that we were talking about at the beginning? So there are some notes that are like, why is this note late? Well, because depending on, and it's not going to always be this note, depending on the round robin, sometimes it'll be one note, sometimes. So there are some round robins that don't have the same attack length or speed than others. But anyway, just like a real orchestra. See what happened at the beginning? Da 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 da. So there's that. It's part of the game. Anyway, no complaint. It's there, just for you to know. When all together, you don't even notice. So no big deal. What's the trick that I've done here? Kind of like, well, this is just the strings, right? But I just wanted to sell the idea, right? Of see how good they sound. And so I added a few more things, right? There's this guy here. I just wanted a type of percussive sound that blends with the strings. So if I add that on snare, it won't blend as well as if I add this particular shaker, kind of like lower register type of shaker. It's kind of like I need this tight. I need to tighten this pulse, right? So I added this a little bit. Saddle is there, so it's not just the strings. So we have a little bit of a shaker there. But anyway, so showing a little bit behind the curtains, the viola does this. So the A flat G is the motive second that goes generally between when the highest strings stop. Then we've got this on the cellos, double basses, and violas for definition on the lowest strings, which do this. Danton, but see the Danton note gets blurry here because of the low register closed quote unquote voicing in the low register, so the viola will brighten it a little bit. But here's where it comes in handy. I doubled the cellos. These cellos are doubled. Dun 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 dun. Right? I doubled this with that patch that comes very handy that we've built earlier, remember? And this is going to add definition to that A flat G, because now it's going to be in octaves. Plus it has the spiccato that adds definition. If we saw this one, so that thing is going to add definition when we bring everything together. Right? It's going to add definition to the whole thing. Tradom plus violas. There you go. Cool. And then we've got the double basses doing this. And that's it, just one more trick to make this whole thing sound like this. So now let's focus on the high strings. So we're just talking production here at this point, right? So just how to use samples to get the most out of them, type of thing. So the strings, the driving motif in the high register of the strings is this. The problem with this is that if we want that kind of like more epic strings in the mezzo forte to piano register, but still we want that cinematic sound, it's gonna sound a little bit small, see? So I just layered it with just epic massive strings, which is just quote unquote too much layering. At a softer register. So I've got kind of like mezzo forte, just violins, which is already unrealistic because 2 notes equals double the violins because it's samples, but it still sounds small. And I layered this with piano super layered high string staccato. So without these guys, with. See, so one is a little bit smaller, not timbre, right? But it's a smaller sound, and the other one is thicker, more cinematic sound, if that's what you want. In the combination, it's basically, so each one of the section, staccato, spiccato, and then on top of that, kind of like massive low ensemble layered, and high spiccato ensemble, massive sound layered. Altogether sounds like this. If we were to just have the actual staccato strings, without the shaker, see that it doesn't pulse as well. It kind of like dances around, just it's a little bit something weird here. And I love it, and it's very realistic, even the sound. I like it very much. But with this, adds a tint of more cinematic, thicker, bigger, if that's what you want. Not always we want this. And the shaker on top just adds. Cool. That's how you fool people. All right. Awesome. Or directors, in this case. They want the sound many times. There's nothing wrong with what we just did. And then we've got the legatos. Cool. So 3 types of legatos, with the legato vibrato non vibrato being the obvious difference. I generally like the legato espressivo, the more. When you know these libraries very well, there's some sounds that will have some noise or a pop here and there. Sometimes I know where they are and I even avoid them when I'm playing that melody. But anyway, happens with every library. And same thing with violins too, same thing with violas. We'll go to violas, we don't need to do violins too. Oh, I didn't show the rest of the articulations, but same thing. And then we are going to have, so the 3 legatos, then we're going to have the 3 sustains. Okay, so we're going to have this expressivo, and then vibrato, sustain non-vibrato, which is nice sometimes. Non-vibrato all the time is a little bit weird. Continuing, we've got the harmonics. Tremolos. I love that they have the tremolo sul ponticello. And then they have step trills and the whole step, or the, yeah. There you go. And I think it's worth taking a look at the cello. Beautiful legatos. Okay, Cinesamples is not a library that's known for the best legatos. It does not compete maybe with Cinematic Studio strings, but the sound is there. The other legato and the third one. Cool. And then we've got these different sustains. And we've got harmonics. The tremolos, which sound great. And then sulpons, these are great as well. And then the harvest and the hope. And there you go. And then bass, same thing. But bass sounds great. String sample libraries, to me it's very important that the basses have sampled that very like low, deep, and cinematic sound for whenever I'm not layering it with a sub synth or something like this. I want for the bass to actually be able to carry all the weight of the orchestra like a real double bass would do. The key switches are up here. Something to notice here. So okay, and the rest of the articulations, not all of them. Then what we've created here, which is very simple. The only thing to mention here is that there's a key switch at the end. We go from expressive legato, so more vibrato, to non-vibrato for the last note, the last chord. For the high strings, violins 1, 2, and viola. For the low strings, we go with tremolo, the first part, and we transition to sustained no vibrato in the last note. And all together is this guy here. That's it. If you want to hear the violins and how they sound different. Oh, let's do violins 1, 2, and viola. For the low strings. In this case, no tricks, completely naked. I didn't do the ensemble pads and layering on top the legatos. It's completely naked, almost free tempo. I aligned it to tempo a little bit, and I did a little bit of retardandos here and there for that more natural rubato feeling at the end. Not rubato, but retardando. There you go. I hope this was insightful. I hope it was fun. Bye-bye.